What happened at the Game Awards? What happened on our 50-50 bet? Hey man, I did not win a 50-50 bet, okay? I'm sitting here and I'm betting on red and this shit hit green. Most of us and many others were anticipating that a Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3 reveal was gonna happen at the Game Awards. And it just didn't. I kind of want to investigate a little bit why that is, why it just didn't end up making it there, but also telling the situation that Square is currently in is leading into evidence of like why they might not have done that. And if we look back to some of the previous marketing campaigns and how they were handled for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and Part 1, to get a bit of understanding like what Square could be doing differently in this situation and why they would be doing it differently. So the big one, there was recently some Square Enix big financial changes. It's no secret that Square is in a very weird spot right now, not at the direct fault of like FF16 or FF14 or Final Fantasy VII. It's pretty much completely unrelated to that spot, but Square's in like a weird area right now where they've laid off a ton of people multiple times throughout the company. A lot of people that worked in the American divisions, a lot of people that worked in the EU divisions. And the reason behind it is that Square is effectively in a restructuring where they kind of have to go through a big management shift in the way that they operate and make games. Why is that? Well, over the past like many years, there was just a lot of projects that did not hit. They invested a whole bunch of money into a whole bunch of different areas, and then even CEOs were leaning in and they're like, well, let's do NFTs and stuff, and that clearly didn't work out, and that previous NFT guy is now gone. The new dude is kind of approaching this in the same way that they're looking at what Capcom did. Capcom had a direct focus on their big IPs and had a commitment to their big IPs right around the Resident Evil 7 to Monster Hunter World releases, right around 2017 to 2018. 2018, 2019 is where it really started hitting, right? But it took them a few years. It took Capcom like literally 3 to 4 years of not doing so great for them to effectively get to a point where they're doing okay. At the moment, it seems like Square kind of needs to do the same thing. The bombing of like the Avengers game, the separation from that side of their company, all just was a lot of stuff that all happened in a very similar time frame. And then a lot of weird games would come out at the same time where they're just trying to like do everything, but nothing is directly related to the stuff that people were wanting. So now they got a CEO that is kind of like, so we need to focus on our IPs, right? We got to like invest and make sure our IPs are hitting and they're meeting the demands and they're actually hitting in a way that makes fucking sense instead of just weird spin-offs all over the place, which, yeah, this is sound. This all makes sense. Granted, the recent CEO is a dude that is like trying to save money in every single way possible. So he's like, you know, aggressively pitching a lot of like generative AI and all that kind of stuff. It's not the best scenario. That being said, we kind of get a painted picture of what Square Enix is going through, where they are as a company right now. They're not hemorrhaging cash. In fact, if you look at Square and their net profits and returns, like no kidding, they're not on a constant upwards trend. In fact, even compared to like 2020 and before, no joke, like they're doing so much better than they were like 4 to 5 years ago, like 5 to 6 years ago, especially. Like, bro, like if you look at all the graphs, like there's this like trend every once in a while in the 2010s and shit, and then right around 2020, it's like boom, and it hasn't been a constant keep booming. It's been and they like sort of like evened out, but they're still doing way better than they were like 5, 6, 7 years ago. You know, the problem with all business is that number only go up. Got to make people happy. Got to appease shareholders. Number only go up. Shareholders not happy. Oh, I did it again, didn't I? Anyway, with all that out of the way, they're at a part right now where they're like having to find a way to appease these shareholders and make people happy, or make them happy, not directly people. Has this had a direct impact on the development of some games? It has. But is it the games that are obviously the ones that would be getting the lion's end of all the budget? No, straight up. Like, if you have Final Fantasy in the title, you're good, dude. like if you have like Nier in the title, you're likely good. Actually, he recently talked about some stuff. If you have Dragon Quest in the title, if you're one of like the straight up like main flagship Square Enix games, most likely unaffected budgetarily by a lot of this stuff. You're actually already there. That's the stuff that they want to focus on. It's all the weird shit like the foam stars and the quiet place and the remasters of this and that and that. A lot of their mobile division, like that kind of stuff. Like many of those things are going to be compromised in some way in the next like few years. Yeah, Octopath is generally good. It's like an established IP. They're just good with it, you know? It's the stuff that makes them money. So how does that relate to Final Fantasy VII? We recently found out that the Game Awards is getting viewership that eclipses the Super Bowl, my dude. Like there's more people watching the Game Awards on a global level than even like the biggest media event we have in the entirety of the United States. It's a worldwide phenomenon. Things ain't cheap. They're likely very expensive. When you get primetime space that is like a 60-second to 2-minute to 3-minute ad, it's like there's more reveals that these things can cost upwards of like $1 million, which in comparison to even the Super Bowl is cheap. Like even in comparison to like a 30-second spot of the Super Bowl, that's also very cheap, you know? It's actually shockingly cheap compared to the Super Bowl. There was actually 0 Square Enix present at all in any advertisement form in any way at the Game Awards this year. That was the same thing for even Nintendo to a degree. In fact, Nintendo worked with Square Enix on one specific ad that was tied to Nintendo Switch 2, but it was a general Nintendo Switch 2 has games, please pay attention. And it was like kind of a very small thing. So it was effectively a no-show. Like a no-show, almost a no-show for anything new from Nintendo, a no-show for anything new from Square. Nintendo, it makes sense, they don't need it. But Square Enix is a bit different, and I think Square Enix stepped out for obvious reasons. They probably don't want to rely on big events like this to spread this around. Even though there's a shit ton of history of Jeff working directly with Final Fantasy VII as well as other Square Enix properties to promote them at the Game Awards and Summer Games Fest. So where does that lead to us in 2026? Is this game even coming out in a little over a year from now? Because that's the big prediction. The big prediction is that we're going to get a release date that sort of lines up with the 30th anniversary of Final Fantasy VII, which is late January 2027. And I think that's still going to happen. I personally do. We're sort of out here guesstimating this entire situation based on how the devs are talking and what we expect to be the next big event, which is clearly a 30th anniversary. It makes the most logical sense. And even the devs have said as much that, hey, the next game is not going to take as long to make as even Remake took, because they have so many tools and development things were figured out with Remake and Rebirth. So with all that lining up, it's like, yeah, early 2027 makes a lot of sense. This begins to feel like a pretty decent time frame for where this shit could be. I don't think it's happening anytime soon. I think it's a direct answer to some of the sales concern that happened with Rebirth, where it didn't really hit the metrics that they wanted it to. Ended up doing okay, but they needed a multi-platform release for it, you know? It was also announced very early, almost 2-year gap of time in between Rebirth's like reveal, first trailer, first teaser to actually like launch, right? It was like mid 2022, and then it came out like early 2024. So it was like a healthy, chunky period of time, man. I think they're trying to avoid that, because let's remind ourselves, that was unique to Rebirth, but if we go back, what was the marketing blitz like for Final Fantasy VII Remake? The game sort of vanished. It was announced in 2015, and it pretty much disappeared off of the face of the earth until just about 8 months before its launch. I was actually before it got delayed a little bit, meaning that it first showed up again in May of 2019 after like a 4-year hiatus. It vanished, and then it came back real big, and everything since then was like big thing, big thing, big thing, big thing, that eventually led up to a very, very substantial, giant, like one of Square's fastest best-selling games in a while. It was like, shit, that was crazy. Because of where we're at right now, I think that's gonna happen again. I just do, man. I think it makes a lot of sense that Part 3 is likely also going to be PlayStation exclusive. I know they don't want it to be. They've already been saying that the next game is going to be multi-platform, but at what point does it become multi-platform? That is not clear. To be real, with the expectations that the previous games have set up, I don't think it's going to take a year or a year plus like it did with the first game to eventually make its way to Nintendo Switch or PC or Xbox or whatever. Nah, bro, I genuinely feel that if it's on PlayStation, it's probably going to be about like half as much as it was in the previous. because each one of the exclusivities are almost like half. Like, no kidding. First one was like a little over 2 years when it first showed up on, little under 2 years when it first showed up on EGS. And then on Rebirth, it took about a year, like 11 months. A 6-month time frame of exclusivity on like PlayStation 5. I can see that they would do that. Still keep it a PlayStation thing because ultimately PlayStation's the reason this entire Remake series exists. They were part of the initial budgeting of it and the reason it was at all their events and all their shows. So yeah, dude, I can definitely see State of Play and obviously Sony associated events being the thing that they would want to pull you in on of like big PlayStation game, dude, because it is. It's a big PlayStation game. It effectively is a PlayStation exclusive for a healthy amount of time that makes it feel like, yeah, I'm glad I have my PS5. I'm going to be getting this thing with my freaking PS5, you know? A reminder, even though the exclusivity wasn't as long, Rebirth also had direct like marketing and Sony help. They had State of Plays exclusive for Rebirth. Like, no shit. Where it's like, hey, we're dedicating an entire Sony event, like Sony online event, specifically to Final Fantasy VII, or Final Fantasy VII Rebirth specifically. And there's like, hey, this is all the gameplay. Here's a big reveal. Here's all this shit. We're going to spend like 20 minutes just yapping about it. So yeah, I think it's just going to get that treatment more than ever before. I'll be real, as somebody that really pays attention to the way that Square has been marketing a lot of their games, Rebirth marketing was not it, dude. It had some things that happened, like commercials were bare. Online advertisement was not that much. It was almost like the second game was going to sell itself entirely around the fact that y'all played the first game, right? And to be real, there was another game that happened like legit, like literally within the same time frame right before it. Rebirth went through a marketing blitz right at the same point Final Fantasy 16 was going through its launch period. And guess which thing I remember seeing a ton of was Final Fantasy 16 shit. Live action commercials, giant events, huge press tours, like FF16 shit was everywhere, dude. But there was also like a problem with that. FF16 and Rebirth, no shit, were like 7 months. Like it didn't make any sense. You were getting a massive, giant, big budget new Final Fantasy with your massive, giant, big budget new Final Fantasy. No kidding, like right after. They were so close together. It was like summer 2023 for like February 2024. It was like, what are we doing here, dude? They didn't get these games any time to breathe. And it could have potentially affected both of them. Like it could have been actually somewhat cannibalized like across the board. They were both action games too, you know? All I gotta say is there's clearly things that they should not approach this the exact same way. I looked at the previous games and their releases as sort of like a gameplay, like a game plan, like literally a quarterback playbook of how they could be doing this shit. And thinking they would line up and do similar things, it starts to make a lot of sense why they would not do the Game Awards at this point. There's a massive Final Fantasy VII event that's about to happen in just over a month. Like a little bit over, is it January or February? I think it's January. Final Fantasy VII is officially returning to Nintendo. Big mainline Final Fantasy games that aren't just old games re-released are returning to Nintendo hardware for the first time in a very long time. Final Fantasy 16, Final Fantasy 15, FF7 Remake, these things have not been on Switch hardware or Nintendo hardware in general. So for the first time in a substantial time that aren't just like old games ported that are PlayStation games and shit. Yeah, it's like late January 31st. Final Fantasy's back on Nintendo hardware. The numbers on Nintendo hardware are reflecting it, dude. Like when the pre-orders went up, it topped the charts. Clearly, like a lot of people have been missing out on this shit that have wanted to be a part of it. And Square is recognizing this now, which is why their multi-platform strategy is in effect, you know? So again, there's a big FF7 thing happening where we're kind of like celebrating FF7 Remake all over again with a bunch of new things that game has. It actually has more stuff. But is that it? Is that actually it? Like, let's be real. When do you think that's gonna happen? Probably not at the beginning of the year, but at the later part of the year? Oh yeah, that would make a lot of sense. It would make a shit ton of sense that at some point in the third or fourth quarter of 2026, that there is a release and launch of FF7 Remake Part 2. Rebirth's gonna make it. So what is this all leading up to? This is building anticipation. This is building like a relationship with its new audience on Nintendo hardware. This is building a relationship with the people that have played the previous games that are here to go towards something, and that's the 30th anniversary. And in my opinion, what is on the 30th anniversary, I think close to it or around it will be the actual release of Part 3. Is it going to be on Switch day one? I don't think so, but it will be there soon. It will be there within that first year on Nintendo Switch hardware. What I'm trying to say is that it isn't just an FF7 Part 3 situation. We're looking at a multi-title release plan that is likely building up to a very big Part 3 PlayStation exclusive to an eventual giant PC/Nintendo release that all take place in 2027 from the beginning of the year moving on. In the same way that we have multiple Final Fantasy VII games quite literally dropping this year to get you hyped and excited for the next game, the year after to be like, so here's the new games and now everybody can have them. So there's a lot, dude. There's actually a shit ton. But if you want my predictions, I have to think about the stuff that Hamaguchi and Nomura were talking about recently in an interview as early as October. And they were specifically talking about the title of the next game. And this was like late October. We would most likely even know the name of the game, like it would be figured out this year, or potentially know the name of the game this year. Do I anticipate that is going to happen and we're going to know it and there's going to be a teaser trailer of some kind? I don't know. What I do know is that at the end of January next year is the 29th anniversary of FF7, which is kind of like a lead-in to like, hey, next year's our 30th anniversary. So if there's one thing I think they could do is that they could at least say something. I think they could. But the first time we actually see this game and get a real ass trailer, I think we gotta wait till spring to summer. I think they want this game to be like in our heads and aware of it, and every couple of months it escalates and elevates, and then you get something new and crazy, and by the time there's a final trailer and that bitch is out. And that kind of lines up with like a Summer Games Fest situation, which is much cheaper to get a trailer and a big reveal there. Also a reminder, FF7 Rebirth's first big gameplay reveal was at a Jeff show. Since this didn't happen, I do not have a ton of confidence that it's gonna happen anytime soon. Which is not like the best news, but we've had some conversations about this, and I actually agree with this sentiment when Final Fantasy fans talk about this. My dude, this is like the beginning of the end. Like, there is no more speculation, wondering where this can go after. There is no more future, which is ultimately why the gift sub bet was so high for FF7, even though it was very likely. I kind of was looking at the Game Awards as like, is this gonna be the next day of the rest of my life type shit? Because this shit has occupied a huge part of my career for the past 12 fucking years almost, or will have for 12 years by the time it maybe comes out. I start to look at this and I'm like, oh, I don't know if I want it to get announced yet. Like, this is the countdown to it. Like, I feel like the meteor is in the sky, bro, and it just keeps getting closer and closer type shit. It's literally the beginning of the end. As soon as the game has a title, as soon as that title is revealed, as soon as you get any inkling or an idea of what the story is, how the characters are acting, what is going on, like, this is literally it. You know something. And that to me is kind of like, ooh, we'll never have this moment again. We are never gonna have a moment again in the future. We're waiting on the first reveal of the next big Final Fantasy VII game. At least the remake trilogy. That shit's gone. This is it. We're never experiencing this again. Until they make FF7 Part 2 in, 2032. To wrap up and summarize what's going on, I think it makes sense why Square doesn't want to spend money on big trailer reveals at events. I don't think they have the equity to do that. I also don't think they want to announce the game too early. I think they want to keep it fresh in your mind, similar to how FF7 Remake was when they took a giant break, announced the game way too early, Switch developers. They pretty much announced it in like May, spring and summer of 2019, and it came out early 2020 before it was delayed a little bit. At this point, I think they're gonna follow a similar path, getting you close to and like under a year, 7 to 8 months of time between this game actually, you seeing it and understanding it's a real video game, to getting more and more stuff. You get like 2 to 3 months in between every single one of those. It's literally Summer Games Fest, Tokyo Game Show, big reveal, another thing at the Game Awards, big reveal, giant media tour at the early part of 2027, and then that bitch is out. It's Jover. That's what I think is gonna happen. And I think it's gonna be directly tied to Sony stuff. It just makes sense, man. It makes sense if they go back and they're like, hey, we're gonna be at State of Plays. And one of the State of Plays has like another FF7 jingle of some shit. Am I disappointed that it wasn't there? No. I don't think disappointed is the right answer. I think I'm like a little nervous when we eventually get to a point where it seems like it's gonna happen. And if they choose to announce it any earlier and they go out of their way and do something around the 29th anniversary, which is a little over a month, I will be very surprised. I'll be really surprised if they do that. Because if one thing makes sense, it's that they probably just want you to realize, hey, it's a real big game and it's actually not that far away.